The morning of the 30th of May, 1453. 3 days of plunder are coming to an end. Footsteps echo through the streets of Constantinople because the streets are nearly empty. In a city that was the center of the world for 1,000 years, sources say barely 30 to 50,000 people now live. Within the walls, there isn't a city. There are villages separated by farmland. A young sultan looks out at this scene from his horse. Everyone knows he's a conqueror, but no one knows this. The hard part is only just beginning. Taking a city took 8 weeks. Bringing it back to life would take a lifetime. Today, we go to the day history books skip, life in Istanbul after the conquest. What followed the conquest was the bitter but standard rule of the era's laws of war. A city that fell after resisting was open to 3 days of plunder by the army. That's what happened in Constantinople too. Homes were emptied, tens of thousands were taken captive, valuables from churches were seized. But it's also worth knowing, this was already a dying city. In the 12th century, roughly 400,000 people lived in Constantinople. The Great Plague of 1347 took nearly half the population, and as the empire shrank, the city emptied along with it. By the day of the conquest, much of the vast area enclosed by the walls was gardens, vineyards, and ruins. So what fell into Mehmed's hands wasn't a gleaming capital. It was a tired city, living in the shadow of its past. Mehmed had 2 options ahead of him: leave this ruin as plundered spoils, or make it the heart of his empire. He announced his decision to the whole world just 3 days after the conquest, on the 1st of June, 1453. The first Friday prayer was held in the 1,000-year-old Hagia Sophia. This wasn't just a religious ceremony, it was the strongest way of saying, this city is now our capital. Though Edirne remained the official capital for a while longer, in Mehmed's eyes, the center was now here. He even took a new title, Caesar-i Rum, Caesar of Rome. It was an ambitious message. Mehmed saw himself not as the destroyer of Byzantium, but as the new owner of the Roman Empire, and an imperial capital couldn't stay empty. How do you fill an empty city? Mehmed's answer was 2 methods: invitation and force. First, volunteers were called. Those who came were promised homes, gardens, tax relief. But when voluntary migration wasn't enough, forced resettlement stepped in. This was the Ottoman policy of sürgün. Thousands of families from Anatolia and the Balkans, Muslim, Greek, Armenian, Jewish, were uprooted and resettled in Istanbul. Those brought from Aksaray settled in the district we still call Aksaray today. Those from Karaman settled in the Big and Little Karaman neighborhoods. Near Fatih, some of Istanbul's district names are, in fact, memorials to these forced journeys. Imagine, you're a family born on the plains of Konya, and by a single decree, you leave everything behind and move to a half-empty, giant city you've never seen. Istanbul's new life was built on top of thousands of these small stories of exile. Forced resettlement alone wasn't enough. The arriving families needed concrete incentives to actually put down roots in the city. The state typically assigned newcomers empty or half-ruined houses. Some were granted exemption from extraordinary taxes for a set period. Craftsmen were settled on the same streets as others in their trade. This made it easier for the state to keep track of them, while also letting people in the same profession support one another. Some Istanbul street names, still in use today, referencing basket makers, quilt makers, furriers, are traces of this very system. Of course, not every family succeeded. Some tried to flee back to their hometowns within a few years, and according to some sources, the state even took extra measures to prevent such escapes. But the overall picture was this. Within a generation, these forcibly resettled families were now ordinary residents of the city. Their children were born in Istanbul, a generation that spoke with an Istanbul accent. Perhaps the least known side of the conquest is this. Mehmed didn't fill the city only with Muslims, and this wasn't accidental. On the 6th of January 1454, he personally appointed the Orthodox clergyman Gennadios as patriarch and granted him broad authority. The Greek community would govern its own churches, courts, and schools. A similar system was later established for the Armenian and Jewish communities, the first building blocks of what would later be called the millet system. The Genoese merchants of Galata were also given a charter shortly after the conquest. Their goods would be untouched, their trade would continue. This shouldn't be read through today's eyes as some utopia of tolerance. Not everyone was equal. Non-Muslims paid extra taxes and were subject to restrictions. But in the world of the 15th century, guaranteeing an institutional life to the population of a conquered city was far from ordinary. And there was a practical reason too. An imperial capital needed merchants, craftsmen, sailors. It needed everyone. Trade is what makes a city, and Mehmed knew this better than anyone. In the winter of 1455–56, construction began on the Bedestan, the core seed of what we today call the Grand Bazaar. In this secure, thick-walled, domed structure, fabrics and jewels would be bought and sold. When it was completed around 1461, Mehmed set up a clever system. Rental income from the shops was endowed to the upkeep of Hagia Sophia. So every bolt of cloth sold in the bazaar helped keep the city's greatest sanctuary standing. Commerce and worship were part of a single system. As inns, shops, and workshops were added around the Bedestan, the structure grew, and over the centuries it turned into that labyrinth of thousands of shops. The stones laid just 2 years after the conquest are still the foundation of the Grand Bazaar you walk through today. The Istanbul of the 1450s was one giant construction site. The walls are repaired. The first palace, later called the Old Palace, rose in today's Beyazıt. In the 1460s, construction began on the new palace at Sarayburnu, Topkapı, and the most symbolic project of all, in 1463, on the hill where the ruined Church of the Holy Apostles, burial place of Byzantine emperors, once stood, the foundation of the Fatih Mosque and its complex was laid. A kulliyeh didn't just mean a mosque, it meant madrasas, a library, a hospital, a soup kitchen, a bathhouse. A single endowed structure organized the entire life of a district. This was the signature of Ottoman urban planning. The state established a complex in an area, and a neighborhood wove itself into being around it. Within 20 years of the conquest, the city's skyline had visibly changed. Domes and minarets now shared the same sky as the Byzantine domes. Now, let's put ourselves in the Istanbul of 1470 for a day. You're the son of a family brought here by forced resettlement from Karaman. Your father opened a coppersmith's shop near the Grand Bazaar. You wake to the call to prayer, but the sound of church bells from the other end of the neighborhood arrives too. Both are now the sounds of the same morning. You fetch water from the fountain, bread from the bakery. The baker is Greek, and the haggling turns half Turkish, half Greek. The road down to the market is packed. Armenian jewelers, Jewish cloth merchants, a Genoese trader's interpreter, newly arrived Serbian stonemasons. At noon, under the cool dome of the Bedestan, the goods of the world change hands. Toward afternoon, you head to the bathhouse, the city's most democratic space. In the steam, everyone is equal. Coming home in the evening, you can still hear hammering from the Fatih complex construction site. This city, declared dead 20 years ago, doesn't even sleep anymore. So, did this policy work? Let the numbers speak. In the 1477 census, 16,324 households were recorded in the city, including Galata, roughly 60 to 70,000 people. Some historians say even more, counting the poor and soldiers. The breakdown tells the story of the city's new identity. Roughly 9,500 Muslim households, more than 3,700 Greek households, more than 1,600 Jewish households, plus Armenians, Christians brought from Crimea, and many more. So just 24 years after the conquest, roughly 4 out of every 10 households in Istanbul were non-Muslim. This wasn't a conversion project, it was a repopulation project, and the people who filled it came from every corner of the empire. When Mehmed died in 1481, the Istanbul he left behind was well on its way to becoming one of Europe's most populous cities. If we're going to tell this story honestly, we have to name the shadows too. Forced resettlement, as the name suggests, was compulsory. Thousands of families didn't leave their homes willingly. Period sources speak of those who tried to flee back. For the tens of thousands taken captive during the conquest, life was slavery until they could buy their freedom. And the security the new order offered wasn't equality. Non-Muslim communities were protected, but they came second. Istanbul's rebirth was written with real costs, paid by real people. History's great transformations are usually like this at once, a founding story and a story of loss. Seeing both at once is what turns it from a fairy tale into history. Half a century after the conquest, Istanbul had become one of Europe's largest cities. By the 16th century, it would be unquestionably the largest. His grandson, Suleiman's magnificent capital, Mimar Sinan's skyline, all of it rose on top of the decisions made in those empty streets of 1453. Today, when you pass through Aksaray, haggle in the Grand Bazaar, or walk past a church in Fena, you're actually inside the same story. The story of a city declared dead, rebuilt by people gathered from every corner of the empire. Cities don't live by stone, they live by people. And Istanbul is 500 years of proof. So, what do you think? Was it Mehmed's vision that rebuilt Istanbul, or the labor of the tens of thousands of ordinary people who often unwillingly moved there? Let's discuss in the comments. Next episode, we'll head to another era, another story of this city. If you enjoy in-depth Ottoman history like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit like.